Okay, so welcome everyone and good morning. Welcome to our Xenogenics Pardot Engagement Studio training session. My name's Sarah Hill. You obviously all probably had emails from me in the last couple of days. I'm one of the Pardot consultants at Xenogenics, and I really work with customers to implement Pardot for them, but also to work with them to make sure that they're getting the most out of the system and that they're really maximising their return on investment from it. As we go through the session today, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the kind of chat box or the Q&A box. I will try to get to them, but we're quite tight on time. We've got a lot to cover. So if I don't get to them by the end of the session, then I will follow up with you afterwards. Okay, so very briefly then, what is Engagement Studio? Engagement Studio is really a lead nurturing engine. It uses a flow builder that allows you to create intelligent programs that will really engage your prospects. I personally find it one of the best tools in Pardot. It can save you loads of time on your marketing programs. Once you've set your programs up, you can leave them to run with just a little bit of looking at them once in a while and checking that they're running okay. And what's really great is that it can provide a really personalised experience for your prospects, so you can really deliver to them different content based on who they are, on what they're interacting with, and different content based on you know, what stage they're at in their customer journey. And although it is primarily seen as a tool to move prospects from being at the earliest stage of their journey, really you can use it at any stage. So you can use it for customer onboarding, right through to re-engaging your older customers who maybe haven't bought for you in a while. So it's a really flexible, intelligent tool. Okay, so having used Engagement Studio for quite a while and also being engaged with customers who are using Engagement Studio, one of my real top recommendations would be to really plan out what your objectives are before you start. Who are you wanting to target? What are you wanting to achieve? And this is all before you even open the tool in Pardot. Studios can sometimes get quite complex, so it really helps when you're building them if you've done the groundwork beforehand and you've really done lots of planning. So it's really worth thinking about: who am I targeting? Why am I targeting them? What you will need is to have all of your lists built and ready before you start. So if you don't know how to build your lists or you're unsure, I'm actually running another webinar on Tuesday of next week at 9:30, which will go through exactly that, building lists and how to deal with the different kinds of lists in Pardot. So please sign up to that if you want to. Also have a think about how many emails you want to send. Another thing that you need to have prepared before you start is the emails within Pardot, and they need to be email templates that you build in Pardot that you're going to use for your programs. So you really need to plan your content out and have thought about that and be prepared with that before you start building. Also have a think about how long should the gaps be between your emails. As a general rule in marketing, I usually try not to send an email more than once a week, unless someone's interacting with my content, and then I might make that gap a little bit shorter. But it's up to you and your business. You know your customers best. It's up to you to decide, you know, how often you should be contacting them. It's also good to think about what are the individual journeys you want to take your customers on. You know, where do you want to segment them? What content do we want to provide, in what order? What I often do at this point when I'm thinking about this is draw it out, go the old-fashioned way, get a pen and paper and draw out my plan of how I want my flow to look. And that often helps me visualize it during the planning stage, and then I've got my diagram ready for when I start to build. Okay. What actions do you want to take? If someone's interacting with your emails on your engagement studio, do I want to send them more emails? Do I want to add them to a list? I might want to add them to Salesforce if they aren't already in Salesforce. I might want to give them a score so that my sales team can start interacting with that person and maybe give them a call, and my salespeople will know which are the hot leads and the ones that they should be contacting the soonest. Does anyone need to be notified? If someone fills in a form, do we want to make sure that our sales team know about that straight away? Well, that's something that we can build into Engagement Studio. And one of the key things to think about is what's going to happen when this particular program is finished. Do we want to add people into a new nurture program, a follow-up program? Do we want their journey to end there? It's completely up to you, but it's definitely worth thinking about that and adding steps in to facilitate that when you're planning your whole program. And this kind of planning is really key to building not only the best personalized program, but also a program that really gets the results that you're looking for. And also, speaking from experience, it can be quite frustrating if you get to the bottom of your program thinking you've finished it, to realise you've missed out a step earlier on, and sometimes it can be quite complicated to add one in. So my recommendation would definitely be planning. So Engagement Studio is really built on using program logic, and there are 3 kinds of logic that we use in Engagement Studio. The first is action, and that means we're asking Pardot to do something. So we might be asking Pardot to send an email, add someone to a list, assign it to one of our internal users, or maybe even alert an internal user. So that's what we use the action logic for. We can also use triggers, and that means we're asking Pardot to listen for something. So that might be listening for an open or an email click. We might be listening for a form to be filled in or a landing page to be completed, or we might be looking for the download of a file that we've made available. The third logic that we can use is a rule, and that means we're asking Pardot to check for something. And this is really great because within your Engagement Studio programs, you can further segment your data and give personalized and more tailored content to certain sections of the data that you've got. So what you might ask Pardot to check for is somebody a part of a particular campaign or a Salesforce campaign? We can also use any of the default or custom fields that are in Pardot, and we can filter people based on those fields. So for example, we could say we want to look for people with a particular company size, or that their job title contains manager, for example. Or we could be looking for asking the rule to check for prospects that are owned by particular internal users. And what we can do here with rules, and it's something that I'll show you when we get into the program, is we can create quite complex rules. So we can use more than one criteria. So we could, for example, say that we want to look for prospects that are assigned to a particular user and that are their office is in London, and that their employees are over 500. And then we could serve them up with a different experience to all the other prospects on the list. So one of the things that I've discovered through my time of working with Pardot, and one thing that I wanted to cover in a bit more detail before we go into the demo section, is an area that often causes some confusion. So this is when we're asking Pardot to look for a trigger, such as a form filled in or an email click. We're asked when we want to evaluate. And here we have 2 options. So the first option is that we ask Pardot to evaluate up to a maximum of so many days. And for this example, I put 5. What that means, it's quite a fluid measure of time, and it means that Pardot is constantly checking for that action. So if for example, we're saying we want to check for a form being filled in, as soon as that form's filled in, Pardot will know about it, and your prospect will immediately move on to the next step in your engagement studio as soon as they've filled the form in. If they don't fill the form in after the 5 days, they'll proceed on to the next step. This is good for a number of reasons. So it really works because it means your prospects can really be moving through your program at their own pace. And it also means that they're engaging at the time at which they're responsive. So for example, if we start our engagement studio at 9 o'clock in the morning, our emails and any subsequent emails would typically be sent at 9 o'clock in the morning, because the timings is always a day, they're full days. But if we send this email at 9 o'clock in the morning and our prospect clicks on it at 1 p.m, then their subsequent emails will be sent to them at 1 p.m. So they would get that email when to them it's the most interesting, and it's when you know that they are responding to you. There is a word of caution with using the up to maximum of option though, in that it can happen if you don't really think it through and you don't test your studio very well, that you could end up sending all your emails really quickly to your most responsive prospects. So unless you're building wait periods at a later time, then all your best prospects could get all of your emails on one day, which is not good. We want to drip feed them. Okay, the other option here is to wait for 5 days, and that is a hard wait, and that means that Pardot is not even going to evaluate, and it doesn't care if someone has filled your form in. It is going to wait for 5 days and then it's going to look. So your prospects will never move through to the next stage until the 5 days waiting period is up. This can be good if you're trying to send, for example, a weekly email, because you're then in control of when the emails are being sent. But the downside to this can be if you had an action that was important to you based on that trigger. So for example, if it's a form filled in, you don't want to be waiting 5 days before your sales team are alerted that someone has filled the form in. You want your sales team to know straight away. So in that scenario, you would not be wanting to use wait periods. Another thing worth mentioning here is if you were to send, if you select, and it's something that I'll show you a bit later, if we select to send our emails during business hours only, the wait period would include times that aren't included in your business hours. So if you say, I'm not going to send emails on a Saturday and a Sunday, your wait time would still include the Saturday and the Sunday. But any emails wouldn't be sent outside of the time that you've specified. Okay, so let's have a quick jump in. We're going into the demo now, so let's have a quick look out of Zoom. And we're going to start building an engagement studio program within Pardot. So the first thing we're going to want to do when we've set up a studio is it's going to ask you to add a name in, and that's completely up to you. Obviously go along with your own naming convention. And we're also going to be adding it into a folder. These are required fields, but your folder is literally just telling it where to organize it. So if you want to look in your folders and find your content for that folder, you can at a later date. It's also really good practice to add in a description. So if one of your colleagues looks in, they know what you're doing. And one of the main keys to a Pardot engagement studio is the recipient list. So this is the list that you're going to send all of your information to. You can add more than one list in here. So if we want to send another list, we just click on the drop down and we can keep adding all of our test lists for this example here. What we can also do here is add a suppression list. So if you decide that there's a list of people that you absolutely don't want to receive this email, then you would add that list in here and you can select from exactly the same lists. The next option that we're going to be looking at here is if we want to send emails during business hours only, which is the thing that I mentioned a minute ago. So we can toggle that off if we don't, and we just want to send emails 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's absolutely fine. But if we tick on that, we can choose what are our most appropriate business days. So for example, some customers that I work with, they are a lot more, get a lot more response if they send on a Saturday and Sunday, but maybe midweek, they don't get a lot of response. So it's up to you and your business what you think the most appropriate days are to be sending you emails. You can also select the time. It's not accurate, it is just by hours. And the time zone. So that really controls when your emails are going to be sent, and no emails would be sent outside of this time inside of Pardot. If then the last section that we've got on here is to select if we want to allow a prospect to enter the program more than once. So if we tick that box, we're basically saying that once someone gets to the bottom, yes, they can go back round and start at the top again. So we can add in a wait time at days before they're eligible to re-enter. So once they hit the red stopper at the bottom of your program, we're going to want to wait 5 days before they can re-enter again at the top. And another key decision to make is whether you're going to allow unlimited entries, which I would advise against in most cases, because people will just literally keep going round and round and round and keep getting the same thing delivered to them over and over again. Or you can allow them just to be limited and go into the program as many times as you control. So once we're happy with all of those decisions, we're going to click save. Well, already obviously created one earlier on when I was practicing, and that will allow us to start building out our engagement program, which we can look at our plan that we've already drawn out on our bit of paper if we want. But whenever we want to add a step, what we need to do is click on the little grey plus here, and that will bring us up the selection of the elements that we want to add. So do we want to add the action, the trigger, or the rule? Usually you're going to use either an action or a rule as the first step in your engagement studio. So I'm going to go with an action for this example. And here's all the different actions that you can take. So we can adjust the score, we can assign to Salesforce, we can assign to a queue. There's quite a few different, we can create a task in Salesforce, we can notify a user. But as usual, the best thing is at the bottom, which we use most often, send an email. So click on that, and this will then bring up a list of all our email templates. So we're going to ask for our Pardot training email 1. If you're unsure and you've got a couple of different emails that have got a similar title, you can hover over the little camera and it will show you a very, very small preview, but at least it gives you an idea. Then we have to make the decisions of when we want to send our email. So the first question is, we could send it immediately, which means as soon as we press start and we've started our studio, the emails will start sending. We could ask it to wait, and that's the same as what I mentioned earlier on, is a hard wait. So it will just wait the number of days that you've specified. Or we could also ask it to send on a particular date. So if we click on here, it brings up a calendar. And the key thing with this is if we select a date, let's say we select tomorrow, anyone that enters the program, so anyone that is newly added to the list after this date, will just skip this step, so they wouldn't receive that email. So I'm going to use immediately for our example here. And typically then what we're going to do after we've had the first email sent is probably look for a trigger. So we're going to add a trigger in here, and there's quite a few different selections for triggers as well. So we could be looking for clicks, email opens, files downloaded, forms, form handlers, and landing pages. So let's say we're going to use a form, and we can select that we want to use any form or a specific form. So this is really looking for, has my prospect that's received that email and running through my program completed this particular form? Okay. then I need to move up a little bit. We can evaluate when, which is the thing that I went through a few minutes ago, and we can either select a wait period or up to a maximum of. So we're going to wait, let's say, 2 days. So then what happens when we put a trigger in is we get 2 paths. The first path being the no path. So that means that after the 2 days waiting up to, if they haven't filled the form in, they're going to go down this path here. And we're going to put some activity in there to happen to those people. If they have filled the form in, they're going to follow the path on the right-hand side, and they can have different activity based on the fact that they filled our form in. So let's put a rule in if someone's filled the form, so we can show a rule. And let's say we want to use one of our custom, a default field, let's say. And then we can scroll through all of our default fields, or we can type in, if we know what the field is, we can just type in, I want to look for, let's say, job title. And we can use all of the different options to decide what we're going to look for in our job title. So I'm going to say job title contains manager. Okay, so we're going to look for anyone that's filled in the form and that their job title then contains manager on this side. And then we can add in an additional condition and make this a complex rule. And we have the same options here when we're adding in a new condition, exactly the same fields. So this time, let's say we're going to look for an assigned user, and we're going to look for an assigned user of Alex. Done. So what we're saying here is that we're looking for all conditions are met, or any conditions. So if all conditions are met, the job title is manager and they're assigned to Alex, we're going to evaluate this immediately and we're going to save that. And that then comes up with another junction. So we can say if it doesn't contain, if it's not assigned to Alex and they're not a manager, they're going to go this way. And if it is assigned to Alex and they are a manager, they're going to go this way. And it has to, as a complex rule, and that the settings that I've done, it has to meet both of those conditions. So if it does, let's say we're going to then add an action in to, let's say we're going to notify Alex because his customers have filled in the form and they're his management-based customers, and we want to make sure that Alex is giving them a call. If they don't, then what we can do is, let's say, send them another email. And again, we just go through the same process. Let's find our second email. We'll have a few emails that are called Pardot here. There we go. We're going to send them another email. Now, what we can do is if we think, well, actually, I want these people who didn't fill the form in to receive a second email, we can actually copy and paste steps here. So we're going to click select up the top, click on our email that we want to copy it up the top again. And then when we click on our little plus sign, we've got a new option in here with copied steps. So we can add that in, and that gives us another step. We can also add in at any point an end. So that then, if I scroll out a little bit, I know it gets very small, it's going to end with, after they've received the second email, they're just going to end, and these folks here are going to go through a different route and end down here. So that's built quite a simple engagement studio, but hopefully it's given you a little bit of a demo of what we can achieve. Once we've done that, what we're going to do is move over to testing our email. So the key with this is you can move through all of the possibilities in your program and make sure that people aren't getting their emails really quickly, and make sure that the gaps are as you planned. So all we do to do that, we've toggled over to test at the top, and we're going to select begin test. And that then shows us the route that people can go through. So we're going to say, was the form completed within the 2 days? Well, yes, it was. And then we go down this route. Does the prospect match the following conditions? Yes, it did. I'm going to go, and then it will tell us, It's showing us at the side here what the log is, when they're going to receive any of the information from us, and then it gives you a little summary here at the bottom. So then we can go up and we can start over and we can begin the test again and test it through all of the different scenarios that we've got. Then once we're happy with it and we're fine with the studio, we're ready to go, we simply press start up the top, and that will give us the options whether to start now or to do a scheduled date and time, or it gives us the option of when we want to stop it. So we never want to stop it and we want it to be running to get forever, or we want to stop it on a scheduled date and time. So once we've got our program running and it's all going and we're really excited because we know we've created a really good program, what we can do is re-enter that program and look at the reporting tab here, and this will give us the options to find out who is running through our program and where they're going and what our statistics are. So if we look at each email, what we can get is the basic email kind of overviews. So how many have been sent and what the click-through rates are. And we can also do the same of that for the triggers. So we can look at how many went yes and how many went down the no aisle. And the same for our rules. So it gives us yes and no options. If we click on any of these numbers here, we'll open it in a new tab so we can see it. It will give us a list of the people, the actual prospects that are at that stage or that moved through that stage in your studio. We can click on any of these numbers and get the same similar information. And then what we can also do, if we go up to tools at the top and click CSV export, that will export us a CSV file that gives us an overview of all the statistics for each email that's been sent out during the campaign. So this is quite helpful when you get to the end of a campaign. You can really see all the stats and what you've covered, and your clicks, your click-through rates, your opt-ins, your opt-outs, and what forms have been completed, landing pages, and all of the stats that you're going to need. So that's a really helpful tool for your overviews. So let's jump back quickly into our presentation, because I've got a few things to be aware of. These are, I guess, gotchas when it comes to Pardot. So they're things that are worth knowing anyway. So if you delete a step while your program's running, what you'd need to do is pause your program and go back into build and delete a step. Your prospects would automatically move to the next step. So they'll just skip that step basically. If you remove a prospect from a list, they'll stop moving through your campaign altogether. But if you then add them back in, they'll resume where they were removed. They won't go back into the top and start all over again. If a prospect unsubscribes, they won't receive any more emails from you, but what they would do is still proceed through your program. So if you've got other steps in there that are things like adding them to lists or notifying users, that kind of thing, that would still happen. It would just be the emails that they're not receiving. But if you are running your program off more than one list and they opt out of one list, but they're in the other list, they would still receive your emails. One gotcha that seems to get people quite a lot of the time is that landing pages always trump a form. So if you're using a Pardot landing page off your email and you're asking your prospects to fill in a form on the landing page, and you're wanting Pardot to evaluate and a trigger if they filled the landing page in or not, you must use landing page completion, not use the form. If you use the form, it won't work. Even though the form is on the landing page, the landing page will always trump the form. So also, if you are to add in new steps after prospects have hit that big red circle at the bottom, they won't visit those steps. Once someone's reached the end of your program, it is the end. It's also worth, the last point there is to set a reminder. Don't assume because you've done all your amazing planning and you've tested it and you've built it and you're really confident. Don't always assume that it's going to do what you think. Sometimes it can throw in a few curveballs there, and you know, it's always worth maybe setting a reminder, checking weekly on your programs, just make sure that they're all running the way that you want them to be running. Okay, well, that's it. I know it was an absolutely massively whistle-stop tour through Pardot. I've got a bit of a sore throat now from all the talking. I hope that was useful to all of you. I know there has been a couple of questions come in, but I haven't been able to read them. What I'll do is I'll follow up with you afterwards and answer those questions personally. You've got my contact details there. You know, you've all received emails from me anyway, so you should be able to contact me if you need to. I'll see most of you hopefully on Tuesday at the lists webinar. But if you've got any questions, please contact me. Thanks very much.